Thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking today about defending your wealth in a time of crisis. My name is Nathan Krampe. I'm the founder of Lions Wealth Management, and a lot of what I talk about on a daily basis is going to be exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So if you have questions about your personal wealth, about your personal wealth plan, we can set up a consultation to go through that and to iron out some details as what's going to be the best way for you to defend your wealth in a time of crisis. Okay, we're going to get to three distinct areas today. First one is going to be the economy as well as the stock market, kind of expectations there, and obviously where are we at and where are we going. Second area that we're going to get to then is the election. Now, when we talk about defending your wealth, politics have a lot to do with that. So no matter what side of the aisle you're on, there's going to be key ways that you can be working with your wealth and key ways that you need to be defending your wealth. Last area then that we're going to be talking about relates to your personal wealth plan. I'm going to give you three areas for your personal wealth and your family wealth plan to be considering of how you can defend your wealth. And then I also am going to give three areas for you as a business owner and what you can do or make sure you have in place in order to defend your business's wealth going forward. Well, let's dive into it. Let's dive into the economy and the stock market. That's probably on your mind because that's most likely what's on everyone's mind right now. It all comes back down to jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. And that is where we have the key element of what's going on with the destruction of our economy. We're going to talk about that and how we're closing a lot of the restaurants, factories, offices completely around the country and the reopening of that as well. We're also going to be talking a lot about the fact that we're in this really, really deep depression or deep recession, kind of however you look at it, and what that means for growth of our economy and lack of inflation right now, just in general, and what that means for things going forward. And then lastly, volatility is a part of this as well. And it's no joke when we take a look at the quick sell-off in March, followed by this just historic run in April. Volatility is out there in the stock market, and we need to work with the volatility and try to find some ways to be guarding your wealth even in spite of some of that volatility. So, let's talk about jobs. That's the key to all of this. Now, we have lost jobs at a historic rate, and make no joke about it, we're continuing to lose a number of jobs right now, and we're losing anywhere between 3 to 5 million jobs a week. And when we take a look at history, never before in history have we seen this kind of job loss. So over the course of the last about 7 weeks, we have lost more jobs than the last about 3 decades have ever created. Think about that. We're losing more jobs in a number of weeks than what we have completely created in a matter of decades. So when we're talking about jobs, that's a big deal because when we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about how the economy is going to start growing again, well, it comes back to who's employed and the money they can spend. Now, again, this is just another way to describe that same type of a feel, but never before in history have we seen this type of job loss happen, and it's only getting worse as of right now. So that is something that we need to be considering. That's something we need to be taking a look at. What the economy is really looking at right now is the fact that we have this historic job loss, and most of that's in sectors that we already know about, whether that's retail. We have job loss in restaurants, some healthcare even. A lot of the jobs that are kind of the lowest service sector jobs, travel, leisure, most of those jobs have been lost over the course of the last couple months. Well, with the reopening of the economies as that's starting to progress, the whole idea is that we start getting better, that we really start to see an improvement in that sector. So great news there. Great reasons to be optimistic if we have a reopening and people start getting their jobs back and going back to work, getting money, and spending it. There's some howevers though with this. And when we take a look at how long people can survive in a shutdown, well, most people only have 1 to 3 months worth of savings. Well, companies are the same way. Companies only have about 1 to 3 months worth of savings as well for the small businesses. So what that says is that even though we're reopening the economy, some of these jobs may not be coming back. We may have lost them permanently. Especially some of the small businesses who are just getting by in general, they may not be able to reopen. And then there's the unemployment claims. When you go and file for your unemployment, you obviously are receiving some unemployment benefits. Well, right now, there's many employees that are receiving more in unemployment benefits than they were when they were working full time. So they're actually gaining more money, and a lot of them are able to pay some of their bills. So what that also means is that it's going to take a while for those people to decide they want to go back to work. Obviously, they're not working, and they're getting paid a good amount of money to do that. To go back to working and getting paid less is going to be kind of a setback for them. So there's a lot to be considering when we start talking about getting back to work with many of these people. The other issue, though, is that we may continue to see a lot of job loss happening. Now, this time it may not be in the service sector, restaurants, hotels, things like that, but it may be more related to white collar. That is going to be our next key area that we're going to be watching, because a lot of those layoffs take time. You see, larger corporations have obviously more cash flow, they have more cash on hand, so they can make payroll for a number of months. Well, what happens if they're not manufacturing the way that they used to? What happens if they don't have the demand for their goods or their services the way they used to? That's where layoffs happen, and that's where they need to write their balance sheets. So there may be a lot more layoffs to come in different areas of the economy. That's also something to be considering, because as we talk about reopening the economy, as we talk about a lot of these things, there may be some job loss that's permanent, and there may be some more layoffs to come, even though we have an open economy. So those are things obviously that we're going to be looking towards in the future, and ways that we need to be working with your investments to make sure that in case we have the worst come to worst, in case we start seeing more layoffs in different sectors, in different areas, that you're not nearly affected in the same way with your wealth. So what are we looking for? What are we looking at when we come to expectations on the economy, and then ultimately where to be invested? Well, this shows kind of the colors of where we have been and where we're going over the course of the last number of quarters. And you can see that we've had some really good times. Now, green means that we're growing in the economies. And if you take a look at the lines that we're all the way down at the bottom, we've had some quarters that we've grown really well. Other quarters that have been a little more hard to grow. When we take a look, though, at where we're at today, you can see the entirety of the world is in a very, very poor place when it comes to their economy. Red is incredibly bad. Green's good. Green means that we're growing. Red means that we're really not doing well whatsoever. And obviously you know that. Now here's the important part. Here's what is really important as the thought process of what's to come. The next number of quarters. You see, when we have a huge amount of layoffs, when we have closing of the economy, we have depression style and era reflection of the economy. We have a lot of very bad news that comes out. Well, we're basically down in the dumps. We're in the basement of the economy. There's not really many places that we can go. We can't go down very much farther. So any sort of growth, anything that we have with respect to kind of a rebound in the economy means we're better than what we used to be. So I do think that later part of this year, coming into the election, I think the economy is going to be a little bit better than what it is right now. So there's different ways to be invested with that we'll talk about here in a second. But I do actually expect that because credit cycles take a long time, because of the fact that we're only really a couple months into this recession, that there's going to be some prolonged kind of hardships that are going to come up. One of them is obviously going to be if we have more layoffs in other areas, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet, which means I think the winter is going to be a little bit harder on everyone, including the economy. That's some good expectations when it comes to the thought process, and now we can start talking about where to be invested. So, there's a number of different areas that we can be invested into when we come to the different parts of where we're at with the economy. When we are doing really poorly, like we're doing right now with the economy, the key areas that we want to be invested are areas that are going to safeguard your wealth. Well, what do I mean by that? Obviously, cash is a part of it. Bonds are a part of it. Other things like annuities, the insurance products that can provide some sorts of guarantees can be a part of it. But realistically speaking, we don't want to own a lot of really volatile items. Now that's really, the expectation is just kind of getting through this period of time. When we go back to where we will be, once the economy is reopening a little bit more and we have a little more growth happening, that's the time to start adding in some more stocks and some more investments that can be growing with everything. Now, between now and then, obviously there's not going to be someone that just says, yep, and we're going to flip the switch and now we're going to grow. So there's different areas that we can be invested into with all of these different types of economies that we can see. So whether we're in a very poor economy or a very good economy, we can be invested into many areas. Currently, with a very, very poor economy, we really just want to safeguard the money. So that can be a number of different areas. Cash is one of them, bonds, some insurance products that can be used to provide some guarantees. Those are all some great areas to just safeguard the money. You want to make sure you get through this period of time. When the economy starts shifting from being really bad to just kind of bad, well, you're actually going to start seeing a lot of areas for growth to come in the stock market. That's when you can start adding in a little bit more with respect to growth opportunities. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities to have different areas to grow your wealth to come. So obviously some of that is different types of technology. Healthcare has been a very, very long trend that you may want to be invested into as well. And that comes back to your personal situation. So I'm not telling you to be invested into certain areas, but I want to say those are good areas that you may want to consider. Well, coming back into the winter then, as things get just a little more up in the air as to where our economy is, and remember, that's going to come back to how poorly we're doing as the economy. If we're having more and more job loss, more and more businesses going out of business, well, this could come true. What that means then is we need to take a step back and be a little more protection minded. But if we're not at the depths of kind of all of this depression style drama that we're going through right now, we can add in some different areas. So some investments that produce dividends. Obviously ones that are still going to be working are the safety plays, safeguarding your wealth with cash and other areas as bonds as well. But for the most part, we don't need to be nearly as fearful in that period of time. So those are the key places that you can be invested, and it's really just about getting through this period of time. And when we talk about the fear of missing out, we've had growth happen in April, but when it comes back to it, getting through the horrific period of times is just as important as having growth in your account. Growth is going to come because there's going to be some very good opportunities in the future. When we talk about the bad times, if we talk about what to avoid, we want to avoid as much pain as possible and get prepared for the good times. That's what we're going to be talking about more and more as we come. But as we get into the election, there's going to be some very key elements, because remember, as goes the election, as goes the president, they have a lot of implications that can happen with the economy as a whole. So when we take a look at it, we've had some key themes that have been working for the past decade or more. Well, one of those key themes are longevity. People are living longer. They're not having as much money to spend, many of them, in their latter years. And savings rates have come down, which we've talked about, and that is actually something that is because of the fact that bonds are not paying as much, so we don't know where to go to place money to save, so we're having to go into other areas. Well, some of those could be the stock market. So you're seeing a lot of different opportunities that come about solely because of the demographics and because of how politics plays into that. So like we just talked about, we are living longer as a society, and that means that there's going to be a lot of political pressure to make sure that we're all taken care of. So whether it is healthcare, or whether it is Social Security or Medicare or any other area, politics are a big piece of that, and making sure that we're solvent and making sure that we're able to keep paying on those benefits is going to be vital. So no matter if you're on one side of the aisle over another, politics are going to come into your wealth plan in the future. Well, what has the stock market done historically? Most of the time, the stock market is actually positive. There's only a few times in history that it's been, in recent history I should say, that has been poor. Well, 2008 was one of those years. So right now we are in a poor economy. I'm not saying we're going to have a repeat of the stock market of where it was in 2008 and the poor performance, but what I am saying is that we look to history to see what the future could hold, and there's plenty of reasons to think that the stock market could go up. Obviously, with the period of time that we're in, we're still in kind of the unknown period. But historically, the median of whether we are an incumbent or whether we have a new president doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. We do have growth in the stock market that generally happens and is generally positive for the economy solely on the fact that we remove an unknown. And I've always talked about the fact that the thing the stock market hates more than anything else is the unknown. Well, we have a huge unknown with the election. We have a bigger unknown with the coronavirus. So that is saying that we are not out of the woods yet, but if we remove unknowns, it starts getting things a little bit better with respect to the stock market. Okay, what's also worked now historically is what we're looking at here. There's been many different things that have worked, and it really comes back to who is in power, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, and what the agenda is. So what worked historically may not work in the future for different sectors, but that's where the stock market as a whole generally does well when we have good sectors that are pulling up some of the bad sectors. So just to know that, and over the course of the last decade, I've talked about this before, healthcare has been a great trend. This has actually been because of the Affordable Care Act under President Obama. Well, we don't know if that's going to be a trend going forward depending on who's in office. However, let's go back to longevity. Let's go back to the needs that we have for our for the demographics of the economy, for the demographics of our society. I do think that there's going to be some big needs in the healthcare space, and that's been something that is only getting more and more attention drawn to it. So I think that there may be some opportunities still to come in there. But again, this is something obviously for you to take a look at and to see if this is going to be right for you. So this is not something to say that you need to be having as part of your portfolio, but we look to history and think of what could be working in the future. Also, bonds are a big part of a good portfolio, and the bonds historically have done a good performance. So we're not looking for a complete collapse of bonds. We're not looking for them to be underperforming, no matter which side of the aisle gets into power. Let's wrap up with talking about some planning opportunities that you have for not only yourself, but for your business. Let's start with your personal planning opportunities for your wealth, as well as for your family. Well, there's many things to be considering for how to work with defending your wealth. And for some of you, there may be some insurance products like annuities that may be good to provide some of those protections. Remember, bonds are paying a lot lower yield. Annuities may be able to pay for income the way that bonds are unable to. So this is something that they can provide a lot of times some guarantees, and a lot of times some ways that it can work with your portfolio and work with your investments to defend against some of the poor times. Now, those are some things to be considering. But when we talk about where we're at more and more, like I said, it comes back down to jobs. So there's two areas that I want to talk about as well. One of them is respect to your own personal family and how that relates to your house, your cars, your umbrella policy. Now, think of it this way. When we have a lot of job loss, and if we're going to have a recession that's going to be prolonged, a lot of times people need to resort to some less than ideal things in order to make money. Theft is one of them. Theft is a big piece of the puzzle there, but there's also some other things. Maybe some of the more crafty ones are going to go into lawsuits. A personal umbrella policy for yourself and for your family covers not only your house, but your cars, your autos, and your possessions. What this will help with then is saying you can defend your personal investments, your personal wealth, because over and above your house insurance, your homeowner's insurance, your auto insurance, the umbrella policy will come into play. So if indeed you get sued, this will help pay for a lot of those possible damages. That means it's not going to come back against your personal wealth. Or I should say it doesn't have at least as big of an ability to, because you have money to pay for it. So look into the umbrella policy and increase it if you need to. That's going to be one of the key elements of the wealth planning to make sure that you can get through this period of time and make sure that you are protected correctly. Another area then to be considering is an asset protection trust. So just like the umbrella policy, there may be areas that you have exposure with your wealth. So what I'm talking about is to creditors. And trusts are specifically designed to provide some good guidance for beneficiaries, but also they provide some good guidance for protecting against creditors. So those are going to be some key elements to make sure you can protect your wealth in going through this crisis. So those are three elements for you personally and for your family. For your business and for everything else, now let's start talking about some key things that we can put into place to make sure that your business is taken care of. Well, key employee insurance is going to be a piece of that. What that does is say that when you have some hard times with your business, when some of the key employees are out sick, they're unable to come into work, there may be a time when your business is not able to function very well without them. So this will provide money and provide some insurance in the event some of your key employees are unable to be coming into work for an extended period of time. Now there's also something to be considering as well. You as the owner and some of the other partners that you have most likely have buy-sell agreements. Well, those are in case the worst comes to worst. A lot of times though, you may not have them funded with an insurance policy. So look into that and consider if that's going to be needed for your personal company and for your personal situation. Because the best thing to do is say, how can you have a continuance of your company? How can you have a continuance of making sure that you can do the work you need to do in the event something happens to not only your key employees, but what if something happens to your partners? The worst thing to do is obviously to work with a very brand new partner that has no desire to own any of the business, and they have to make decisions. So the buy-sell agreement will help with that. Okay, last element then that of your business, to defend your business in crisis, defend your business's wealth in a crisis, would be disability insurance. Now, a lot of times this can be disability for the employees as well, because remember, the more you provide for your employees, the better off they're going to be, the more loyal they're going to be, the more they're going to be able to work and make sure that your company can get through this period of time. But that's not just it. It's also for you as well. Disability for yourself, because in case something happens to you, obviously you want to continue receiving a little money to pay for your bills as well. So disability insurance is going to be a big piece of that, and you probably already have something of that in place, but it's a good time to take a look at it, make sure it's going to be necessary and meets all of your kind of obligations that you would have in the future. So those are going to be 3 areas as well. So when we talk about defending your wealth, it's not just about your investments, it's about your business, and it's also about your personal and family. We have talked about a lot, and at the heart of it, jobs are going to be the big piece, and that will dictate where the economy goes. The election is going to be vital because that's going to provide the trajectory of how we're going to be getting through this period of time and coming out better with our economy in the future. And then wealth planning is also a very big piece that you don't want to forget at this point in time. 3 areas and 3 ways to defend your wealth in a crisis. So if you need help, if you want to talk about this a little bit more, I would love to sit down with you and go through a complimentary consultation just to talk through your situation and ways that you may be able to better your own personal wealth plan, as well as better your own personal wealth through this entire recession and poor time. With that, take care and feel free to reach out as you have questions. Have a great rest of the day.